Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the athletic training club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him. And he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor, with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling, not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the 1st floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, He had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill Apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness, and the detectives believed it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful, as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents, and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, no witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that, on May 20, 2008, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting, and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill Apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill Apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill Apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station, but without evidence, he denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find the connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne as part of the deal. He received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind: we don't want her to be forgotten. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Francis and a student at Tyler Junior College, majoring in English literature. She was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot, then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left. Or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple, and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop, when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, it is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions, however, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. The police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, the officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received the call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. The police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked, "For what?" She replied, "For putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house." Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced. Was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Cassie Farrington. Cassie was born on December 22, 1990, in Virginia. She was the second of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. Cassie excelled academically and was an active student, she becoming a member of the National Honor Society and participating in sports. Her initial goal was to pursue a career in medicine. However, when Cassie turned 16, her life drastically changed. She became pregnant, which led her to change her future goals and plans. Several major changes in Cassie's life occurred in the next month. Cassie graduated from high school, gave birth to a baby, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house, all within a brief period, just 1 month. Several years later, she had another child. But over time, her family relationship began to deteriorate. Ultimately, the marriage ended in divorce. Despite this, she persevered, raising her 2 young children in Silver City, a small town with a population of about 10,000. At 22 years old, she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. As she turned 23, Cassie entered into a new relationship with a man named David Berry. He bonded quickly with her children, and she felt grateful for the way things were going good. Rather than rushing into things, they focused on building a life as a family unit. Cassie confided in her loved ones and co-workers that David had brought happiness to both her and her children, and she was hopeful that this new relationship would bring her the peace and happiness she had been missing after her previous failed marriage. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at the Silver City Hospital. They chatted for a few minutes, during which she shared her plan to drive home, pick up her children, and take them to school. Afterward, she intended to return home and rest for a couple of hours before picking her children up from school later that day. School staff called Cassie's parents when they couldn't reach her. Her children had finished their classes, but Cassie hadn't shown up to pick them up. Cassie's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. Thinking Cassie might have overslept after a night shift, her mother asked Cheryl, her landlord, to check if Cassie was home and if she was okay. Cheryl went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. She then walked around the house and peered through the back door window, noticing water pouring from the bathroom into the kitchen. She knocked harder on the door and shouted Cassie's name, but still got no response. With her own key, Cheryl unlocked the door and entered the house. The sound of running water was louder and more distinct. As she walked across the wet floor towards the bathroom, Cheryl called out Cassie's name, her voice shaking slightly. Then she saw Cassie. Cheryl, a coworker and friend of Cassie's, discovered her lifeless body in the overflowing bathtub. She was lying face down, wearing a house robe, as water continued to pour out. Despite Cheryl's first aid skills, she realized that Cassie had been dead for a few hours, as rigor mortis had already set in. This made CPR impossible. Cheryl immediately called 911 to report the incident. She then broke the devastating news to Cassie's parents over the phone, informing them of their daughter's passing. As Cheryl waited for the paramedics and police to arrive, she took a moment to inspect the house. She noticed that the second bathroom, located elsewhere in the house, also had an open faucet with running water. However, the hub there had an overflow protection, so the excess water wasn't running onto the floor but going down the drain. Cheryl also observed that the towel rack in the bathroom had been pulled off the wall and was lying on the floor. Upon receiving the news, Chuck and Darlene, Cassie's parents, were devastated. They stopped everything they were doing and traveled from Arizona to Silver City. Within a few hours, they arrived at the house, where their daughter's body had been found. The police were already on the scene, investigating the circumstances surrounding Cassie's death. The officers observed that there was no sign of forced entry into the house, as all the locks were still in place, the windows were closed, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuables in the house were still intact, so the possibility of robbery was unlikely. The local sheriff questioned Chuck and Darlene, asking if Cassie had any intention of committing suicide and if she had any reason for doing so. However, Chuck and Darlene firmly dismissed this idea and declared that there was no way Cassie would do such a thing. The police chief repeatedly told Cassie's parents that she had likely taken her own life, as if he was trying to convince them of that fact. However, Cassie's parents found the police investigation to be rushed and confusing. Normally, the scene of the case is thoroughly examined and investigated, a process that can take several days. In Cassie's case, the police left the scene just a few hours after her body was found, and they informed Cheryl that she was allowed to enter and use the house. This worries Cassie's parents and they decide to investigate the house themselves. After finding water still in the bathtub, they emptied it and discovered black streaks on the sides of the tub that resembled the marks left by rubber-soled shoes. They also found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger in various places on the floor. Cassie's parents were even more suspicious when the police didn't take the time to search the house for fingerprints. They suspected that the authorities might be trying to close the case quickly without thoroughly investigating it. It wasn't until they contacted the district attorney's office that the police appeared to put in more effort. However, they were still unable to close the case due to the findings of the medical examiner. The autopsy report showed that Cassie had several bruises on her body, particularly around her neck. The examiner concluded that her death was a homicide. However, the investigation had difficulty by the property owner having cleaned up and made some repairs after the incident. This meant that the original crime scene had been disturbed, which could impact the investigation's progress. Cassie's parents were met with silence from the police as the months went by. The police did investigate David Berry, a man Cassie had been seeing before her death, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to a solid alibi. However, as time passed, Cassie's parents grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to solve the case. Their concerns led Chuck and Darlene to request a meeting with the chief district attorney to voice their dissatisfaction with the handling of the investigation, specifically with Detective Jose Sanchez. After reviewing the case file, the district attorney agreed with the parents, finding that Jose had made numerous errors. As a result, Jose was removed from the case and a more experienced detective took over. From the start, Cassie's family and friends suspected her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington, was responsible for her death. At the time of Cassie's passing, Cassie and Bradley was entangled in a heated custody battle over their children. And Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, because he will win custody of the child. Bradley Farrington is a former Silver City police officer who had just retired a few months before Cassie's death, and his good relationship with investigators kept him from being considered a suspect. However, Bradley had a clear motive for the crime and possessed the necessary knowledge to destroy evidence. He was well aware of police procedures and how to cover his tracks. For example, the bath water will wash away any remaining DNA evidence on the body, as well as erase shoe prints on the floor. Given Cassie's familiarity with Bradley, it's likely that she would have opened the door for him. Unfortunately, due to the poor handling of the investigation by the local police, so any evidence linking Bradley and to the crime scene was lost and could not be restored. The only remaining way to hold Bradley accountable is through eyewitness testimony. Cassie had told her parents about their family being abused by Bradley, and that he often acted arrogant because he was a police officer. Cassie lived in constant fear, and Bradley's friends were police officers and she couldn't turn to them for help. She had confided in co-workers about Bradley's threats, including the ominous threat that he would make her disappear without a trace. Tragically, her life was cut short, and she was found dead on March 24, 2014. 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, 28-year-old Bradley Farrington was arrested in connection with Cassie's death. Although Bradley was a suspect, the local police mishandled evidence, leaving none that directly linked him to the crime. As a result, the judge made a decision permitting previously recorded statements from Cassie to be used as testimony during the trial. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified, including Cassie's parents, friends, and co-workers, to whom she had confided about the abuse she endured at the hands of Bradley. Notable among the witnesses was Dr. Michael Hunter, a renowned forensic expert from San Francisco. With over 20 years of experience, Michael presented the jury with autopsy photographs and concluded that Cassie likely died from strangulation. Cassie had injuries to her neck, which supported that conclusion. After a warrant was issued for Bradley's arrest, Jose Sanchez, who initially handled the case, appeared in court. Jose claimed he had never considered Bradley Farrington a suspect because there was no reason to, and also testified that no fingerprints of Bradley were found at Cassie's home. The crime scene was unusually clean, Jose said. He believed the scene was cleaned after the crime was committed, which explains why no fingerprints were found. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018. Bradley was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He later filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in 2020. Bradley appealed his conviction, claiming the trial court erred in allowing Cassie's co-workers, friends, and family members to testify in court. However, the state's highest court declared it had enough evidence to convict Bradley and rejected his appeal. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Romand family. This is the shocking case of the Romand family. Jean-Claude Romand was born on February 11, 1954, in Le Rive, France, and was raised in Clairvaux, Jura. He attended Le Lycée de Lons-le-Saunier until he completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He started classes at Université de Lyon 1, but left after one term, later joining medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It was there that she met Jean-Claude Romand, who was a distant cousin of the family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not capture Florence's interest, and they barely knew each other, not spending much time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Romand was immediately infatuated with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy, together with Romand and Luc Ladmiral, who passed their exams. For the next decade, they maintained a routine of studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude Romand got married, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine was born. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was going about her daily routine in Ferney-Voltaire, France, a few days after Christmas in 1992. With her children, Caroline and Antoine, at school, and her husband Jean-Claude at work in Geneva, it was a normal day, filled with thoughts of their recent Christmas celebrations. While out, she ran into the school president, who had been wanting to talk to her about something since before the holidays. As they exchanged pleasantries and discussed their Christmas experiences, their conversation slowly turned to an unexpected topic, an intriguing incident involving her husband. The headmaster informed Florence about the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, which had led to a school board meeting. Florence recalled the incident, but she was uncertain about the headmaster's intentions. The president revealed his plan to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, who was also a member of the school board. The president's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, where he worked, but his name was not listed. Florence found this odd and somewhat amusing, and she promised to ask her husband about it when he returned from work. After their exchange, they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Romand maintained a high level of privacy regarding his professional life, sharing only limited information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important research and was well respected in the medical field. Romand drew a clear distinction between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence did not have access to his office phone number, as he wanted to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to communicate with him urgently, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call when he was available. Friends often asked Jean-Claude's role at the WHO when speaking with Florence. They would inquire about what exactly Jean-Claude did at the WHO. Florence would try to divert the question with a chuckle, admitting that she too was unsure. Occasionally, she would jokingly speculate that one day she might find out her husband was a secret agent. During the Christmas season of 1992, Florence found out about an annual Christmas tree decorating event organized by the WHO. Her husband had never told her about this event, which made her feel uneasy. From the school president mentioning her husband's absence in the WHO directory, to discovering the unmentioned family event at his workplace after many years of service, these incidents stayed on Florence's mind. It is uncertain how much these revelations troubled her internally, and whether she ever confronted her husband about them. Florence's brother, who was visiting for the holidays, noticed that she seemed deeply saddened during that time. Unfortunately, we can only imagine what conversations took place within the household during this period. As the days went by, the year 1993 began. Just a few days into the new year, Florence and Jean-Claude Romand went shopping together, with Florence encouraging Romand to buy a new suit. Later that same day, after leaving his wife, Romand visited a pharmacy and placed an order that would be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Romand withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. When he left the store, he had tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. The night of January 10th to 11th was uneventful, but at 4 a.m. on January 11th, a frantic call was made to the fire brigade to report a house fire. Garbage collectors, who were out on their early morning rounds, stumbled upon the burning house and quickly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. As the firefighters battled the blaze, they noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone was inside and needed help. Medical personnel were summoned to the scene, and they rescued Jean-Claude Romand from the residence. When he was extracted from the house, Romand appeared to be in shock and was unresponsive, requiring immediate attention from paramedics. He was subsequently taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was put out, allowing the first responders to enter the building. Their family friend, Dr. Luc Ladmiral, was called to the scene, where he watched in horror as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, the police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Romand residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Romand incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. They transformed the Romand residence into a crime scene and reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family. Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation when questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family. Luc couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview several days later. Luc found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family had enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents had preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Romand, revealing a shocking revelation. Romand had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luc's disbelief gradually subsided as he recalled their shared academic journey, which gradually led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year when he had noticed Jean-Claude Romand's absence during an exam. This departure from Romand's typical behavior had raised concerns for Luc. When Luc visited Romand at his residence, he observed his friend's poor health, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Romand confided that he was battling lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, which was exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Romand's request, Luc promised to keep this information confidential, particularly from Florence. Investigators concluded that Luc had no further relevant information. Consequently, they anticipated the forensic laboratory's findings on the incinerated residence, hoping to gain additional insights to aid their investigation. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude during his coma-induced weeks. Law enforcement zeroed in on Jean-Claude Ramond as their prime suspect and initiated a thorough investigation. Although Ramond lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. The educational institution confirmed that Ramond had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Ramond continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. Despite years of academic dedication, attending lectures and studying medical books, Jean-Claude's failure to pass the second examination remained perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session was considered a plausible explanation, and he had the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators examined the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another tragic discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, trying to convey the devastating news to his parents, arrived at their home only to be met with an unsettling silence. Upon entering, he found the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both having suffered fatal gunshot wounds. A forensic analysis confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents were killed with the same weapon used to murder Antoine and Caroline. Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious following the public disclosure of the tragedies. The police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Ramond after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization and had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Ramond was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous, leveraging his supposed position. Ramond enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank, offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Ramond managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 990,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Ramond of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Ramond extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Ramond picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Ramond and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Ramond pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Ramond pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self, in a state of survival mode. The woman agreed to remain silent about the incident, in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Ramond. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in the detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Ramond was promptly approached by investigators, eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Ramond chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking as inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, and the severe injuries sustained by his wife. Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown, but eventually, he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Romand, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude ran and proceeded to sleep beside his wife. He awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children, Caroline and Antoine, who had gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest during that morning. Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Romand couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle, fitted with a silencer, and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day, and he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery. Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Romand resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 990,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme. This was how Jean-Claude Romand sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments. Due to their familiarity with Romand, they placed their full trust in him, and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities, among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade. Throughout his life, on June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Raymond was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent during his incarceration. He had reportedly become a devout Christian and had accepted his mistakes. He would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended, and the grieving families and friends they left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s, when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours, but unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Blake Leibel was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada on the 8th of May in 1981. His family was a well-off family right up the tree. His father, Lorne Leibel, is a well-known real estate tycoon and Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, while Blake's mother, Eleanor Chettle, inherited Alros products from her father, Paul Chettle. This company makes plastic poly-tarp materials and is reported to generate over $28 million in sales annually. But while grandfather Paul Chettle was a success, it was reported that he was known to be a control freak and bully. Paul's wife, Blake's grandmother, suffered from a severe mental illness of some kind. The specific diagnosis remains unknown, but what is known is that when Paul Chettle passed away, he left a will behind that withheld inheritance from his family, pending not only alcohol and drug screening but also an HIV test. Once relatives successfully passed these stipulations, Paul Chettle's girlfriend would get 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, a Cadillac, and some other parting gifts, while Blake's mother got a payout of $12 million. Oddly enough, Blake's brother Cody Leibel was cut out of the will, with Paul Chettle stating that it wasn't out of lack of love, but rather that he knew Cody's father would adequately provide for him. On the other side of the family, Blake and Cody's father, Lorne Leibel, was a man who dated beautiful young women and took them out in fancy Ferraris. He was the envy of any man who set eyes on his fortunes or female companions. When Lorne Leibel split up with Eleanor Chettle, Blake lived with his mom, while Cody lived with his dad. It was during this time that Blake and his father reportedly became distant and estranged, as Blake felt that Lorne wasn't providing enough for him financially. Even so, the Leibel family was, by all accounts, a highly successful one. Even Blake's grandfather, Stanley Leibel, was a well-known sailor who competed in the 1968 Summer Olympics and then later developed hundreds of homes across Toronto. Even Blake's aunt, Terry Leibel, is a Canadian journalist who served as a host for CBC's Olympic coverage during the 1996, 2002, 2004, and 2006 Games. Blake and his brother Cody Leibel were destined for success right from the very start, or at least they certainly had the financial environment around them to allow them to succeed at whatever they put their minds to. As a matter of fact, when Cody Leibel moved to California, he certainly left his mark of success on the world. He even sold his 5,500 square foot home in Beverly Crest for almost $18 million in 2017. The buyer was reportedly Katy Perry. Then later on the same year, Cody bought Reba McEntire's house for a reported $25 million, crowning him the youngest homeowner in Beverly Park history. This move made him neighbors with big names like Sylvester Stallone, Mark Wahlberg, Denzel Washington, and even Eddie Murphy. As the world's youngest owner of a Ferrari Enzo, Cody not only owned a record label, but he was a regular at a poker club called Molly's Game that reportedly hosted famous faces like Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Tobey Maguire. Cody Leibel certainly seemed as successful as the family that raised him. Cody's brother, Blake Leibel, moved to California in 2004. He reportedly still received an allowance from his mother that totaled close to $2 million in just 8 years. In 2011, Blake's mother Eleanor would die of brain cancer, leaving a huge inheritance behind to Blake and Cody. Roughly 2 years later, Blake challenged his mother's will to remove his father as trustee and deny his brother Cody his inheritance. But Blake, who reportedly didn't even attend his mother's funeral, received little sympathy from the courts. But who is Blake Leibel? He wrote and directed a comedy film in 2009 called Bold. It was very low budget, and it didn't hit well at all. The movie was a massive flop with a 2.6-star rating on IMDb, but apparently you can still find it on Plex TV if you're curious. Blake Leibel also directed a 2013 film called Soulmates. He's even listed as a creative consultant and director on a few episodes of Mel Brooks' Spaceballs, the animate. In 2010, Blake published a graphic novel called Syndrome. The novel was about a man named Dr. Chettle, who happens to share the same name as Blake's own mother. In the novel, Dr. Tettel studies serial killers. He also goes as far as to recruit a town full of actors and then set up a fake Truman Show-style scenario. Next, he fakes the execution of a serial killer before wiping his mind and allowing the memoryless man to run free in the fake town, so Chattel can monitor his actions. The Doctor's goal in the book is to cure serial killers. Chattel's character can be quoted saying that evil is not some mysterious force. Evil is a syndrome. Co-author of the book, Ryan Roberts, stated that Blake told him that he had done a lot of research on serial killers. Ryan also recalled how Leibel jerked his hands upward when showing how a victim could be flipped upside down in order to drain them of fluid. In hindsight, Ryan Roberts said he'll never forget that. While Blake didn't actually write or illustrate the final edition of Syndrome, he was credited as creator of the book, and he wrote an introduction at the start of the novel, asking the question, "If you loved hurting things, what would you do?" Syndrome, Blake's biggest success, and it ended up with him giving away stacks of the graphic novels for free at Comic-Con in San Diego. A producer said Blake wanted to be a respected comic book artist, and he used his cash to try and buy that image. He tried hard to come across as cool and edgy, but it was clear to everyone that Blake Leibel had some serious mental issues that he needed to address. His mental state had begun to deteriorate, and he was spiraling into a dark abyss. Those close to him had started to recognize the signs, but none could foresee the depths to which Blake would ultimately sink until it was beyond anyone's reach to save him. Blake Leibel had quite the romantic life. In 2006, Blake met a Californian model named Amanda Braun. Amanda was previously in a relationship with Andrew Olczek, who died in prison following convictions for crimes committed as a crooked hedge fund manager. After 5 years of dating, Blake and Amanda finally tied the knot in 2011. Not long after the wedding, Amanda Braun Leibel gave birth to a son. While the couple appeared to live comfortably in their Beverly Hills mansion, Blake continued to cash in and spend his checks pretty much as quickly as he received them. He reportedly smoked weed constantly and came up with various plans for success, but none of his ideas proved fruitful. During this time, one of Leibel's friends said Blake was developing a dark obsession with brutal violence. It was like Blake was becoming a different person. He was distant and paranoid. Then in the summer of 2015, Blake left Amanda while she was pregnant with their second child. This was reportedly due to his pot-smoking habit consuming his life, but I'd say there was more than a marijuana issue brewing. Blake began isolating from almost everyone as he sank deeper into a world filled with gore, violence, and darkness. He even stopped returning his family's calls and began to suspect that his brother Cody was in deep debt to some Russian gang members, and he was worried it could potentially bring harm back his way. But there was never any evidence that Cody Leibel owed any major debt like that. And no one could understand why Blake's sanity was spiraling out of control. But most of his friends claimed it was initially the death of his mother that brought on this dark madness. Eleanor Chattel's $5.5 million home in Toronto, plus the millions of other dollars acquired due to her death, just wasn't enough for Blake. He was broke, and when he failed to have his mother's will overturned in 2013, he turned to his father to help him pay for his mounting credit card debts. Then Blake was sued by his lawyers for non-payment in the unsuccessful case of Eleanor Chattel's will. After Blake split up with Amanda, he began pitching another original script called Psychopomp. It was about a caped vigilante that cuts off the heads of villains and then uploads his antics to YouTube. But reviewers of the script stated that it was terrible in every way possible. There wasn't one thing about Blake Leibel's new project that anyone liked. It was likened to a bad rip-off version of Batman, where Batman is violent, psychotic, stupid, sadistic, and highly unlikable. Psychopomp was nothing more than a gratuitously violent film devoid of any imaginative flair. However, there were whispers that Hilary Shaw, a producer involved in Children of Men, had expressed interest in the Psychopomp screenplay, yet this supposed development never materialized. While married to a pregnant Amanda Braun, Blake had started seeing Iana Kassian, a stunning 30-year-old Ukrainian former attorney from Kiev. In no time, Blake got her pregnant too, and for a while, they seemed happy and healthy, as Blake pulled Iana into his fantasy world of Hollywood hot pink. All the while, his mental decline was picking up speed at a volatile pace. In May of 2016, Iana gave birth to a baby girl named Diana, and to outside observers, the new family appeared to be doing well. However, the reality was far from idyllic. Blake harbored intense jealousy towards the infant, as a storm of anger raged within him. No longer the sole object of Iana's affection, Blake found himself replaced by baby Diana, pushing him to new heights of psychological instability. He incessantly demanded sexual attention from Iana, threatening to abandon her for another woman if she refused his advances. In an attempt to salvage their relationship, Iana sent her newborn daughter to live with her mother in a nearby apartment, which Blake financially supported. Then on the 20th of May, Blake Leibel was arrested for sexual assault not far from his condo. The alleged victim was Blake's third girlfriend, Constance Bucaferi. She'd been living in another house he owned that was also a couple of miles away from his West Hollywood apartment, where he lived with Iana. Constance claimed Blake forced himself on her in the house. Bucaferi is known for being a storyboard artist on Aquaman and working in the art department for films like Snow White and the Huntsman, P.S. I Love You, and The Emoji Movie. Blake Leibel was released from custody around 15 hours after he was arrested, following a bail payment of $100,000. Iana had bailed Blake out of jail, but finding out about the affair with Constance was the final straw for her. She moved into her mother, Olga Kassian's ma. There was only one door left to check, and it was locked. The cops tried to force the door open to the bedroom, but a mattress was barricading the door from the other side. The cops shouted for whoever was in there to come out. And that's when Blake's voice finally responded, saying he wasn't going to come out because he was scared that the officers were going to beat him up. They assured him that this wouldn't happen and that they were just there to check on his girlfriend to make sure she was okay. Blake replied back that she was fine. He said she was at the hospital and gave them a room number. He also said that his father would be there soon and that he wasn't coming out until then. Blake was referring to his accountant and mentor, Stephen Green. Blake had called Stephen around noon and asked him to come to the apartment. For a month before Stephen Green received that call, he had been unable to get in contact with Blake Leibel. Green had called, messaged, left voicemails, and even emailed Blake several times, but he never got a reply. Stephen Green even left a voicemail on Blake's phone, stating that he was worried about him and that he loved him. He said, whatever was going on, he wanted to help him get through it. But as you're about to find out, it was way too late for that. When Green arrived at the condo, he spoke to Blake through the partially opened bedroom door in the apartment. A short while later, a detective arrived on the scene to find Green now in the living room talking to Blake on the phone. Leibel was still barricaded in the master bedroom. When Green hung up the phone, the detective asked him to call Blake back, which he did. After a few minutes of conversation, Blake Leibel finally agreed to come out. He was only wearing boxer shorts when he emerged from the room. Stephen Green gave Blake some clothing to put on. Luckily, officers checked the clothing first and found Leibel's passport and about $4,000 in cash. It's thought that he was going to try and make a break for it, but that never happened. As the officers entered the bedroom, one of them screamed, "She's on the bed!" The detective immediately ordered everyone to go outside, and he called in the paramedics who were waiting on standby. Sadly, Iana Kassian was pronounced dead at 1:02 p.m. on May 26th. Iana Kassian's naked body was lying on a clean sheet and was covered by a red Mickey Mouse blanket on top of a blue polka dot blanket. Her head was on a pillow. There were abrasions and bruising on the left side of Kassian's face, consistent with blunt force trauma. There were human bite marks on Kassian's left jaw and left bicep, as well as fingernail marks under her jawline. Her scalp had been removed from around her eyebrows to the hairline on the back of her head. A large portion of skin on the right side of her face had also been removed. The skull bone was visible. There were cuts across her lower forehead, below the eyebrows. There was also a cut on the right side of her face, from her cheek to her jawline, and another on the left side of her face, toward where the ear should have been, but it was missing. The medical examiner later proposed that a sharp-bladed tool had been used to cut off the skin, but he also noted that some facial tissue had been ripped away by hand. Considering the extensive damage to Jana's face and skull, combined with the challenging nature of both cutting and tearing the tissue, the doctor believed that inflicting these injuries would have been a lengthy process. Moreover, the presence of inflammation in the tissue and bleeding from several severed samples led to the tragic conclusion that Jana Kassian was still alive while enduring this prolonged torture. The examiner also determined that there was no blood in Jana's heart, veins, or arteries. Half of Jana's blood supply was missing. This is highly unusual, even considering the weight of her injuries. Gravity wouldn't have been enough to drain that much blood from her body. Her heart would have had to have been pumping the entire time. It was the medical examiner's opinion that Blake may have drained Jana's blood by placing her in the bathtub with her head lower than her feet, and then running water over her head, which could have increased the blood flow and potentially interfere with clotting. Due to the presence of foam in her nostrils, the doctor concluded that Jana was probably submerged in water for at least 30 minutes. Her body was then washed and placed on the clean sheet. Her cause of death was ruled as exsanguination, which is the draining of blood. There was an additional pillow to the left of Jana with an indentation on it. It was as if someone had been laying next to her. There were dried blood stains on the mattress beneath the sheet she lay upon. The investigation uncovered the extent of the violence that had occurred throughout Blake Libel's condo. According to court documents, blood stains and pieces of human flesh were discovered behind the bed. Blood was also splattered on the wall near Jana's body. A fragment of an eyebrow was found on the floor beside the bed. In addition to the mattress Jana was lying on, bloodstains were present on another mattress from a second bed in the room, as well as on a side table and in various other areas of the bedroom. The mattress that had been used to obstruct the door belonged to this second bed. A clump of hair and a blood-stained razor were found in the trash can. When cops entered the bathroom of the master bedroom, warm water was running in the bathtub. Bloodstains and hair could be seen in the tub. A green paring knife with blood on it was found in the top drawer in the bathroom. The oval shape of the bloodstains found on the headboard of the bed and the guest bedroom were consistent with having been made via the top of Jana's scalped head. There was blood on 2 towels, a pillowcase, the floor, and the base of the drapes in the guest bedroom. The drain in the tub of the guest bathroom also tested positive for blood. The same drain contained some freshly cut hair. Chemical testing also confirmed the presence of blood that someone had tried to clean up in areas of the dining room, the hallway, the guest bathroom, and both of the bedrooms. The kitchen garbage disposal also tested positive for blood. Then more evidence was found in the dumpster. Inside trash bags that had been thrown down the garbage chute, mere feet from Blake's condo door, investigators found blood-stained bedding, towels, clothing, bath mats, placemats, a bed skirt with bloody handprints, human tissue, including some pieces with hair that appeared to be scalp, and the missing ear. Samples taken from Blake's hand and fingernails also contained Jana's DNA. Jana's hands showed signs of injury consistent with self-defense. The marks and bruises seen on Blake's face when arrested were most likely inflicted by Jana, fighting for her life. The LA coroner concluded that she was kept alive for around 8 hours. He said he'd never seen injuries like that, and he likened them to wartime injuries. Blake Libel was arrested and charged with the torture and murder of Jana Kassian. It was later discovered that he used her phone to order food to the apartment via Postmates twice during the time Jana was missing. Blake's demeanor on the scene was described as ice cold, He acted as if he didn't even know Yana was dead. When an officer told him, he simply replied, "Well, I guess you'll find out who did it then." Leibel donned an evil grin as officers led him away from the condo in handcuffs. On June 26, 2018, Blake Leibel was sentenced to life without parole. Due to the nature of his crimes, he was eligible for the death penalty, but the DA didn't pursue it, even though doctors deemed Blake not to be insane and stated he was fit to stand trial. It took the jury just 3 hours to deliver a guilty verdict. Blake was also ordered to pay about $43 million to Yanakassian's family. Cody Leibel was present on every day of the trial. Blake's father never showed up. Yanakassian had only been living in the United States for a couple of years before tragedy struck. She was working on becoming a translator. What happened to her was absolutely devastating. It was a crime with little motive outside of Blake's narcissistic desire to control women with his allowance. It was as if this aged, evil little boy had never been rejected, and once he was, or rather felt like he couldn't take it. His ego collapsed, and he snatched away the life of his newborn daughter's beautiful mother in the cruelest way possible. Blake Leibel will rot in prison where he belongs, alone with no one, nothing, and no future that will lead to any shedding of light in his direction. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christine Marie Paulia. Once a bright and promising student, Christine became embroiled in a web of tragedy and despair. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unaddressed mental health challenges, peer pressure, and the devastating impact of unresolved trauma. Christine Marie Paulia was born on March 31, 1986, on the peaceful shores of Long Island, New York. She was the second child of Lori and Charles, with her father working as a construction worker and her mother tending to the home. During her early years, Christine was known to be a lively and sociable child, though she could also be shy at times. She shared a close and affectionate relationship with her doting father. Tragically, Christine's life was shattered when her father met an untimely demise in a construction accident, crushed by falling bricks. The sorrow continued to engulf her as she lost her grandfather and great-grandmother soon after. Bereft of her father's comforting presence, Christine's family struggled with grief. Her mother, Lori, grappling with the weight of her husband's death, found solace in drugs, spiraling into addiction. Unable to provide a stable environment, Lori lost custody of Christine and her older brother, who found refuge in the care of their grandparents. During her early school years, Christine was diagnosed with alopecia, a condition that caused her to lose her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. Each morning, she would find clumps of her hair scattered across her pillow, resulting in bald patches and eventually affecting her eyesight, leading to the loss of her eyebrows and eyelashes. Additionally, she also had poor vision, which required her to wear thick eyeglasses from kindergarten through middle school. Christine endured persistent taunts and bullying from her peers, a relentless assault that severely undermined her self-esteem. Isolated and despondent, she grappled with loneliness and depression. Deprived of the companionship of friends to share her trials and triumphs, her classmates struggled to understand the cause of her thinning hair, leading to persistent teasing and mocking. Despite her attempts to conceal the loss with wigs, often described as bulky and reminiscent of Halloween costumes, she found no respite from the ridicule, further adding to her distress. Her drawn-on eyebrows also drew attention, fueling the mockery she faced, even with the wigs. Her torment persisted, escalating to the point where other children would brazenly remove them. Each morning brought a sense of dread, as Christine faced the uncertainty of which classmate would inflict pain upon her that day, deepening her anguish and resentment towards school. After reuniting with her mother, who had overcome her addiction and remarried, Christine and her family left Long Island behind and relocated to Clear Lake City, Texas, a suburb of Houston. This new environment offered a fresh start for Christine and her siblings. Living in a predominantly upper-middle-class neighborhood and enrolling in Clear Lake High School, Christine prepared herself for the possibility of continued bullying, but fate had other plans. In a turn of events, Christine crossed paths with Rachel Carutis and Tiffany Rowell, two popular girls who welcomed her with open arms and extended their friendship to her. Embracing this opportunity, they took Christine under their wing and initiated a remarkable transformation. With their guidance, Christine underwent a physical makeover, learning how to dress and apply makeup while also acquiring more stylish wigs. This outward change mirrored a profound inner shift as Christine blossomed into a more confident, outgoing, and content individual. With Rachel and Tiffany by her side, Christine effortlessly became part of the social scene at her high school, where she was embraced and admired by her classmates. Her transformed demeanor, brimming with confidence and charm, led to her being crowned Miss Irresistible in 2003, marking a poignant milestone in her journey of self-exploration and personal growth. Rachel and Tiffany exemplified social grace, effortlessly navigating popularity while remaining genuinely kind and inclusive. Rachel, with her flowing locks and captivating smile, exuded intelligence and charisma, considering a future in the United States Air Force alongside her passion for art and childcare. Tiffany, adorned with her radiant smile and boundless generosity, harbored dreams of a career in social work, complemented by her talents as an actress and her vast circle of friends, including her closest confidant, Rachel. Although a year ahead in school, they welcomed Christine into their fold, fostering a deep bond of friendship together. The trio reveled in laughter and camaraderie, with Christine finding solace in their company to the extent of shedding her wig, a symbol of her newfound comfort and happiness, as observed by her delighted mother in the summer of 2003. Rachel and Tiffany, at the age of 18, began a new chapter by moving in together. Meanwhile, Christine, who was 17 years old, remained in her final year of high school and frequently visited the pair. It was during this time that Christine started a relationship with Christopher Lee Snyder, a 21-year-old man. However, Christine's mother, stepfather, as well as Rachel and Tiffany, disapproved of the relationship. Their concerns were rooted in Christopher's history of drug abuse and his extensive criminal record, which included armed robbery. Despite the warnings from her loved ones, Christine continued the relationship, leading them to express their belief that she deserved better. Eventually, Christine found herself treading the same path as her boyfriend, succumbing to the allure of various drugs alongside Christopher. Christine's mother would later describe their relationship as toxic, revealing that Christopher not only isolated her daughter from loved ones, but also subjected her to alleged sexual assault. The couple's dynamic was plagued by intense jealousy, leading to frequent and heated conflicts. One particularly humiliating incident occurred when Christopher brazenly appeared at Christine's school, forcibly removing her wig in a deliberate attempt to shame her in front of classmates. Battling deep-seated insecurities and an unquenchable need for Christopher's attention, Christine became possessively jealous whenever he interacted with other girls. Christopher's family, recognizing the doomed nature of their relationship, pointed to the relentless arguments that plagued the couple. One such dispute escalated to the point where Christine spent an entire night on Christopher's front lawn, issuing threats of violence against his family. The police were frequently called to intervene in Christine's tumultuous relationship, and Christopher allegedly confided in his loved ones that he was truly frightened by only two things: the authorities and Christine herself. Despite the countless fights and clashes, Christine adamantly refused to sever ties with Christopher, a decision that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. On the afternoon of July 18, 2003, Christopher and Christine visited Tiffany's home with the intention of stealing drugs and money. Tiffany was present with her boyfriend, Marcus Priscilla, his cousin, Adalbert Sanchez, and Tiffany's friend, Rachel. Allegedly, Marcus and his cousin were involved in drug dealing, leading Christopher and Christine to believe that drugs were stored in Tiffany's home. They planned to rob these drugs, and an argument between Christopher and Marcus ensued, resulting in the shooting of all 4 individuals in the home. Tiffany and Rachel sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including shots to the crotch, indicating a motive of sexual aggravation and jealousy. Adalbert Sanchez, Marcus's cousin, had recently moved to Clear Lake to escape violence, only to be killed in the tragedy shortly after his arrival. Rachel, critically wounded, tried to call for help but was suddenly found by Christine. In a shocking turn of events, Christine repeatedly hit Rachel on the head with the butt of her .38 caliber revolver until Rachel stopped moving. Christine later confessed to the police that Rachel had begged for her life, but Christine had chosen to kill her anyway. Less than an hour after he committed the murders, Christopher drove Christine to her job at Walgreens, where she worked at the makeup counter, and she acted as if nothing had happened. At around 6 p.m., a friend of Tiffany's, who was 18 years old, came to her house to join the group. When she got no response to her knocks, she noticed that Tiffany's and Marcus's vehicles were still parked outside. She became worried, entered the unlocked door, and was met with a horrific scene. Her friends were dead. She immediately fled the scene and called the police. The police characterized the crime scene as excessively brutal, earning the label overkill, due to its horrific nature, initially suspecting it to be linked to drug trafficking. The victims, Tiffany and Rachel, had recently graduated and worked at a strip club, while Marcus was involved in selling cocaine. As a result, the police initially presumed that the crime was orchestrated by professionals connected to the drug trade, given that all the victims, except for Rachel, were killed in a manner consistent with execution-style murders. After the murders, the police launched an investigation, using descriptions of the suspects given by neighbors who had seen them walking to and from the home. The timeline of events showed that the murders took place around 3:25 p.m. Notably, Christine had already clocked into her job before 4 p.m. that same day. Although Christine appeared distressed in front of her family when the murders were announced, she supposedly didn't attend the victim's funeral due to depression. Christine took a significant step towards reforming her life by checking herself into rehab to overcome her drug addiction. Around the same time, Christopher was arrested in Kentucky and put behind bars for unrelated car theft charges, which ultimately led to the demise of their relationship. Nevertheless, the Clear Lake massacre remained a mystery, unsolved, for 3 long years, despite concerted efforts to crack the case. In 2004, Christine checked herself into a rehab center in Ville, Texas, to overcome her addiction to drugs. It was there that she met Stanley Justin Rott, and a romance developed between them. After completing their treatment programs in 2005, they got married, vowing to stay drug-free together. They used the $360,000 trust fund left by Christine's biological father to start their new life, investing in an apartment. Christine's family had concerns about her marriage, particularly given Stanley's past of allegedly taking advantage of women financially. Christine and Stanley had made a conscious effort to stay away from drugs, but their happiness was short-lived. As the second anniversary of the murders approached in July 2005, the media's renewed focus on the case brought back painful memories for Christine. Rather than mourning the loss of her loved ones, she became increasingly upset by the released suspect sketches. This distress led her to confide in Stanley about her role in the murders, causing the couple to go into hiding in November 2005. Christine and Stanley were living in a San Antonio motel room where they spent the following 8 months regularly using heroin and cocaine. On July 8, 2006, the police received an anonymous tip about the murders. The informant claimed to have been in rehab with Christine and overheard her confessing her involvement in the crime to Stanley. Acting on this information, the police located Christine on July 19, 2006, and placed her under arrest. Stanley was also apprehended after the authorities discovered 70 vials of heroin in their room. While in custody, Stanley disclosed a startling revelation to the police. He alleged that Christine had confessed to him that after the shooting, she encountered Rachel, who was still alive, and proceeded to kill her friend by beating her to death. Christine tried to shift the blame to her ex-boyfriend Christopher during her questioning by the detectives, saying he came up with the plan to rob her friends, which went wrong. She told the police that all she wanted was to get drugs and money and didn't mean to hurt anyone. According to Christine, a fight broke out between Christopher and one of the men there, and shots were fired. She claimed Christopher forced her to pull the trigger by putting his hand over hers. The story that was told about the event was proven to be false by the coroner's reports, which showed that 2 different guns were used. Additionally, Christine admitted to going back to the scene to make sure the victims were dead, and she described a disturbing encounter with her friend Rachel, whom she claimed to have hit multiple times with a gun while Rachel was trying to call for help. Despite possessing this knowledge, Christine's defense attorneys maintained that she had never wielded a firearm and harbored no intention of causing harm. Meanwhile, Christopher, the other perpetrator in the crime, was released from jail. However, upon police entering his residence, they discovered that he had vanished without a trace, even before law enforcement arrived. Reportedly, he had become aware of the warrant for his arrest and the impending capital charges against him. Christopher had apparently moved to South Carolina and started dating a woman he met online. After finding out about the arrest warrant, he allegedly brought back pills and soda from South Carolina. Sadly, his body was later found lifeless in a nearby wooded area, and medical examiners confirmed that the cause of death was an overdose of pills. Inside the safe, police found 2 guns that were later matched to the murders. Christine's husband, Stanley, told the authorities that she had admitted to being involved in the murders, and he agreed to testify against her. His testimony was later confirmed to be true. Christine has never expressed remorse for the killings, nor provided any motive. However, psychiatrist Gail Saltz theorizes that her actions stemmed from envy and jealousy toward her more popular friends. Christopher's sister, Brandy, concurs that jealousy was likely the driving force behind the murders, reflecting on Christine's demeanor and remarking, "I remember her being intensely jealous. There must have been some underlying jealousy between Christine and Rachel." Christine was found guilty of 4 counts of capital murder on October 13, 2008. Despite being a juvenile offender at the time of the crimes, she was spared the death penalty and received a life sentence in prison. Despite filing multiple appeals regarding her sentence, all have been rejected. Christine is currently serving her sentence at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and is scheduled for parole eligibility in July 2046, at the age of 60. Christine's downward spiral had devastating consequences, resulting in the loss of innocent lives and leaving the community stunned and grief-stricken. As the community came to terms with the tragedy, they rallied together to pay their respects to those who were taken too soon, and to offer each other comfort and support in the face of unbearable sorrow. The tragic outcome of Christine's story serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need to prioritize mental health awareness and to provide timely support and intervention to individuals grappling with trauma and mental health problems. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to present to you another disturbing case, the case of Paige Bergfeld. The discovery of Paige Bergfeld's car marked the beginning of a perplexing and mysterious story that unfolded on the first Sunday of July 2007. On that day, a red Ford Focus belonging to the missing Paige was discovered. However, the location where the car was found and its condition raised significant questions and suspicions. The vehicle was situated in a remote area Paige rarely visited. Moreover, it was completely engulfed in flames, suggesting that something alarming and unusual had occurred. The county district attorney scrutinized the case closely. His preliminary findings indicated the fire surrounding the car was intentional. This conclusion was corroborated by the fact that nothing else had burned in the vicinity. The strange incident involving Paige Bergfeld's car turned out to be just the beginning of an even more intricate story. June 28, 2007, is a date forever etched in the memories of Paige's family and friends. On that ordinary day, Paige left her 3 children with a friend, Carol Linderholm, early in the morning. Everything seemed normal. No one anticipated trouble or imagined what was soon to transpire. Paige, a responsible mother, always called or came to pick up her children on time. However, when Paige did not return to pick up her children, friends and relatives tried contacting her, but received no response. 8-year-old Jazz, her eldest child, took initiative in searching for his missing mother. After sending several messages to her phone without any reply, Jazz insisted on searching with Carol. They went to the police station, where Jazz reported his mom hadn't returned for him. The community was shocked by her mysterious disappearance, and many were eager to assist in her search. Consequently, a massive public search operation commenced to bring this young woman back to her children and loved ones. That same day, Frank Bergfeld, Paige's father, received a call from an official with the sheriff's department. The message was brief and shocking. His daughter had disappeared. Frank quickly realized something serious was amiss. He attempted to contact Paige, but there was no response. Left with no other option, Frank called his eldest son, Craig, who lived on the opposite side of the country. Without a moment's hesitation, Craig purchased a one-way ticket and arrived in town ready to assist in the search for his sister. Family and friends combined efforts with police and volunteers to initiate a massive search operation. People from various neighborhoods gathered to look for Paige, meticulously combing the surrounding areas and checking every possible corner where any trace of her could be found. The police began by examining Paige's history with her loved ones to determine if they had any involvement in her disappearance. Naturally, authorities directed their attention to Paige's relationship with her first husband, Howard Bigler. Paige and Howard's relationship traced back to her high school years. After graduating from high school, Paige enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Florida, where she met a young man named Howard Bigler. Their mutual affection led them to start dating. Upon successfully obtaining her nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado, where she continued living with her family. In 1995, after some time passed, she married Howard Bigler. At first glance, they appeared as a happy couple. They shared numerous interests and views on life. Nonetheless, there was one significant rift. Paige desired to have children and start a family, while Howard did not share this aspiration. This fundamental disagreement sparked several arguments and many discussions. Attempts at compromise failed repeatedly. Thus, in 1997, they decided it best to part ways through divorce. Despite this separation, their bond remained strong enough that the former spouses continued being friends. Later on, Paige married Rob Dixon, but that marriage too ended in divorce. Following her divorce from Rob, Paige reconnected with Howard once more. Howard claimed he was among the last individuals to see Paige alive on the 28th of that month. They met up in Eagle County, Colorado. It was due to personal business. There, they spent Thursday together. The former spouses then returned to their cities. Howard confirmed that they continued to communicate by phone after the meeting. Upon learning of Paige's disappearance, Howard immediately contacted emergency services. While speaking to the operator, he expressed his concern and belief that something terrible had happened to Paige. The phone recording was corroborated by cell tower data, showing that on the day Paige disappeared, Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area, which is several hours away from where she vanished. This gave police officers reason to remove Howard from the list of suspects. Police began to examine Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and quickly uncovered many events that raised questions and warranted further investigation. It turned out that during their marriage, Paige had reported Rob to the police twice for harassment. After her divorce from her first husband, Paige took a job at a strip club in Denver, where she met Rob Dixon. The man was wealthy and had inherited a large fortune through his family's business. Having fallen in love with each other, Paige and Rob did not hesitate and entered into marriage in 1998. The family settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. A few years later, the couple had 3 children, who became the most important thing in her life. The first years of marriage seemed happy as Paige and Rob were immersed in a world of luxury, leading a well-to-do lifestyle. However, and quite suddenly, things began to fall apart due to financial difficulties Rob faced. Some of his family's businesses had serious problems, and as a result, the economic situation in the family deteriorated so much that Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy. The financial collapse led to a profound family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated so that Paige contacted emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but the time the police arrived, both claimed to have resolved their issues on their own. A year later, another incident occurred that was markedly different. Paige reported Rob for assault, claiming he hit her while she was holding their youngest child. This time, Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and Rob avoided jail time. The relationship between husband and wife continued deteriorating, leading them to separate. Rob subsequently moved to Pennsylvania. Investigators interviewed him to establish his alibi for the day Paige disappeared. Rob asserted he was at home and could not have harmed Paige. Despite the separation, Rob joined the search effort and was very active in trying to find Paige. Investigating officers left no stone unturned in their quest to uncover clues that might unravel this mysterious case and locate the missing mother. One of the initial steps involved a meticulous examination of Paige's car. Since arson is often used to destroy potential evidence, experts thoroughly inspected the vehicle and discovered valuable information. For instance, the driver's seat had been pushed back as far as it would go, suggesting that a tall man had driven it last. Given Paige's shorter stature, she couldn't have reached the pedals from that position. In addition, they found Paige's notebook in the trunk of the car, with several pages torn out, covering June 26 through June 29th. A few days after a burning car was discovered, a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town due to tire problems. A nearby checkbook caught his eye. He promptly reported it to the authorities. As they investigated that section of the road, they also found medical records, insurance cards, and other items belonging to Paige. Sergeant Weiler noticed that several pages from the checkbook had been torn out, and the items were scattered over a considerable distance. Most significantly, a business card found at the scene became key to revisiting the investigation. It was revealed that Paige led a secret life unknown to her loved ones. The business card indicated she worked under the alias Carrie. This discovery challenged all previous assumptions about Paige Bergfeld's disappearance. From that point forward, police officers faced previously unimaginable circumstances. After her divorce, Paige realized she needed to work hard and earn enough to provide for her children and meet their needs. She's starting a children's clothing business, while simultaneously teaching dance lessons and selling kitchen supplies at a company. Despite her busy schedule, Paige always made time for her children, attended parent-teacher association meetings, and stayed active in school groups. However, this new discovery by the police upended everything known before. It turned out she had been living a completely secret life, with another phone used exclusively for professional activities related to her job as an escort. This phone became essential in unraveling the complex mystery that even Paige's close friends and family couldn't have imagined. Investigators were now faced with many questions. Why did such a devoted mother and successful businesswoman decide to live this double life? How was this secret profession connected to her disappearance? All these queries became priority in the investigation, adding layers of complexity and intrigue. Using the cell phone found in Paige's car, Detectives accessed a list of contacts and calls made and received in the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call from that phone was made on June 28th around 9 p.m. After analyzing this information, 7 individuals were identified as suspects. One of them was Lester Ralph Jones. Investigators paid special attention to Jones due to his criminal history, which included violence against women and kidnapping. For one incident, he served 5 years in prison. But that alerted the police. A white car, matching the description given by Carol Page's friend, also raised suspicions. Carol shared crucial details with detectives. She recounted a day when Page approached her car and noticed another white car blocking her driveway. Annoyed, she got behind the wheel to maneuver out, but ended up colliding with the other vehicle. The unknown driver immediately fled the scene. With this information, investigators speculated that Lester might have been obsessed with Page and possibly following her. Further digging revealed that Lester Jones had tried to schedule an appointment with Page the day before she disappeared. When questioned, Lester denied knowing anything about Page's disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, many suspicious items were found in his home: a disposable cell phone, men's wigs, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. Particular attention was given to the disposable cell phone found at Lester's residence. Analysis of call records from Page's cell phone indicated that on the day she went missing, someone tried contacting her multiple times from an unregistered number. When questioned further, Lester claimed he didn't own a second cell phone, indicating he lied to police. Police determined that the phone had been purchased at a supermarket on North Avenue. Store video footage confirmed Lester was indeed the purchaser of that disposable cell phone. When he was shown the video footage, he refused to acknowledge that was him. As a result of all this, Lester Jones became the prime suspect in Page's disappearance. With no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt, the police to follow him and attempted to find Page's body in order to have enough evidence to press charges. The case was put on hold for several years. Meanwhile, the young woman's family and loved ones were at a loss for grief. No one knew what had happened to the young mother, and the search seemed hopeless. As time went on, the hope that Page would be found alive was dwindling. That all changed in 2012 when a hiker accidentally stumbled upon human remains in a ravine among rocks and bushes in Delta County. The find was discovered very close to the road, where Page's personal belongings had been found 5 years earlier. Experts who arrived on the scene were almost certain that it was the body of the young mother. The experts ran a DNA test, and the results confirmed that it was Page. She was found, but it was a grisly end to her story. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body. However, it was found that Page had been struck many times, as several of her bones were broken, particularly the bones in her face. As a result, it was determined that she died from injuries sustained during the beating. This information added to the horrific drama of the story. Page's body was underground, and due to years of soil erosion, ended up on the surface. This may explain why she was not discovered earlier. Lester Ralph Jones's case came to a halt for several years after Page's remains were discovered. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. However, the trial didn't begin until July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors argued that Lester, who already had a history of violence against women, was frustrated at not being able to see Page after trying to get an appointment with her. The main witness for the prosecution was Lester's ex-wife Lisa. She recounted how he kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s. Lisa Lester found it difficult to come to terms with her decision to end the relationship on multiple occasions. Once, he attacked the couple, gun in hand. Tragically, Lisa's partner was shot in the head. A month later, Lester threatened her again, telling her she might end up at the bottom of a lake. Fortunately, Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police. This led to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. Lester's defense attorneys contended that the police had detained an innocent man. They suggested that other clients of Page could have had motives for the crime. However, they did not present convincing evidence linking others to the murder. Lester's current spouse also testified before the jury. Despite knowing he used an escort service, she did not abandon him because of her faith. Nonetheless, she didn't provide him an alibi, and even identified him from a surveillance video at a supermarket where he bought a disposable phone on September 9, 2016. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict in the first trial, leading it to be declared a mistrial. However, the district attorney was firm in believing Lester's guilt and didn't give up. Over several days, he diligently re-examined all evidence. On November 21, 2016, after thoroughly reviewing all of it, the jury reached a verdict. Lester was found guilty of all charges related to Page's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Although the defense appealed this sentence, an appeals court panel upheld it in June 2022 and confirmed Lester's guilt. Page's final farewell took place on April 28, 2012. Her obituary described her as a beautiful and radiant woman whose smile could be compared to the sun. Her tragic loss deeply affected her family and friends. Her 3 children were orphaned and lost their main support and encouragement. Page's case drew public attention and lasted many years. Nevertheless, law enforcement and relatives persevered tirelessly until justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now he won't be able to harm anyone else. Page's story underscores why it's vital to fight for justice, regardless of how long it takes or how much effort is required. Her memory will forever linger in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. She was the middle child of 3, along with her siblings Maris Al Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Tragically, Maria's mother passed away when she was young, leaving her to take on a significant caregiving role for her brothers. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, a nursing student who was 11 years older than her. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. After their wedding, they relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Joel landed a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Their new financial stability allowed them to live a life of luxury, complete with expensive cars and exotic vacations. By the time Maria was 31, she had left her job to focus on raising their 2 young sons. As a devoted stay-at-home mom, Maria cherished every moment with her children and supported her husband Joel, who was 40 at the time. Maria was a devoted mother who spent quality time with her children, taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. She also made time for her own interests, like playing the piano. Despite her happiness at home, she harbored a long-held dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. From the outside, it seemed like Maria and her husband Pellet had a perfect relationship. He would frequently share photos of his family with friends and colleagues, boasting about how wonderful they were. However, beneath the surface, things started to take a turn in 2018, after Maria gave birth to their second son. Those close to Pellet began to notice a change in his behavior. Pellet underwent a physical transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became more outgoing and flirtatious with other women, behavior that didn't align with what was expected of a married man. On social media, he started removing photos of his wife and children, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This new online persona made it seem like he was single and carefree, without the responsibilities of a husband and father. In 2020, Maria's life was turned upside down when she discovered her husband, Pellet, was having an affair with a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. Despite her suspicions, finding airline tickets he had purchased for a trip to Europe with his mistress was the final confirmation of his infidelity. Maria was consumed by heartbreak, depression, and a deep sense of betrayal. She felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the fact that her 10-year marriage was built on lies. To cope with her emotional turmoil, Maria began seeing a therapist who prescribed medication to support her mental health. As Maria grappled with her emotions, she found solace in writing journals, using them as an outlet to process her thoughts and feelings. However, the situation continued to deteriorate, and on September 19, 2020, Maria confronted her husband's infidelity head-on by visiting Janet's house, where she found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet at his house, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. He chose Janet, and during the ensuing argument, Janet called the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left by the time the police arrived. The police then called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, displaying a concerning level of force and anger. The next morning, Maria sent Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their situation. Pellet replied, suggesting they handle things without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. However, just a few hours later, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an emotional email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. He requested a sincere and calm conversation with Maria, free from arguments. Maria agreed to meet with him, and they scheduled a meeting for 5 p.m. the following night. Before meeting her friend Yasmin Martinez, Maria was extremely anxious and messaged her about their plans. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. On September 22, 2020, Maria's husband, Pellet, frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer crews arrived at their house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the scene. Pellet was found performing CPR on Maria at the top of the stairs near their bedroom, still wearing his green hospital scrubs. Their 2 sons were sleeping nearby. When paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts while first responders worked to save Maria's life. An officer asked Pellet about the pills Maria had supposedly taken. He quickly retrieved a bottle from the nearby bathroom medicine cabinet and handed it to the officers. The bottle was later found to contain a prescription for clonazepam, a medication used to treat acute anxiety, panic attacks, and epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like Kazam, calm the nervous system to produce a relaxing effect. However, when an officer examined the pill bottle, he discovered that it was prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. What caught his attention was that the bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet, which is unusual in overdose cases, where the bottle is typically found near the person. The officer's body camera footage showed Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket. This raised suspicions, as it seemed like Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious finding was a needle catheter on the stairs, which was unusual given the presence of 2 young children in the home. The investigators found even more disturbing evidence: syringes and IV equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse might explain the possession of these tools, their presence outside a clinical setting sparked important questions for the investigators. Pellet told the officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression and her mental health had been declining. He said she had taken pills to cope with her emotions, but unfortunately, despite the responders' best efforts, she couldn't be revived and was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria's death, the officers questioned Pellet further in the kitchen. He stated that he and Maria had a conversation earlier that day, became intimate, and then he took a shower. When he came out, he found Maria asleep. Pellet went downstairs for an unspecified reason, and when he returned, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. The officers observed Pellet's strange behavior, including excessive sweating and his inability to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer noticed that Pellet was sweating excessively, more so than anyone else, including the first responder who had been trying to revive Maria for 2 hours. This heightened suspicion and led to him being taken to the police station for further questioning by Sergeant Liz Mata. At the station, Pellet was left alone in an interrogation room, which was being recorded by video cameras. When officers reviewed the footage, they were astonished to see Pellet's sudden outburst. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. The commotion was so intense that people in the nearby hallways and rooms were frightened by the loud noises coming from the room. As a result, Sergeant Louis Matt entered the room at 4 a.m. to speak with Pellet. During their conversation, Pellet opened up again about the events surrounding Maria's death. In a shocking revelation, Pellet also confessed to having an affair with a woman named Janet. He revealed that he had left the family home 5 months prior and was living with Janet at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been involved with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair beforehand. On the night Maria died, her husband visited their family home to talk to her about their marriage. After their conversation, they were intimate. He thought she had fallen asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. The husband confessed to the officer that he had given Maria clonazepam, a medication prescribed to him to help with her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details about how many pills she had taken or how many were left in the bottle. Despite being questioned, the husband was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify what had happened. He was released, and an autopsy was performed on Maria just 8 hours after her death. The timing of the autopsy meant that any cause of death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. However, the autopsy results revealed a surprise. No traces of pills were found in Maria's stomach. Instead, the medical examiner discovered a small red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow, which suggested that she may have been injected with something. The discovery of the mysterious mark on Maria's hand led investigators to explore its potential connection to her death. During their investigation, they found a journal in Maria's home, which she had kept to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, revealing Maria's innermost thoughts and experiences. Investigators learned that Maria loved her husband dearly and wanted to preserve their family, despite his desire to be with someone else. She expressed her desperation to escape her emotional pain, writing, "I want it to stop. My past haunts me, and I don't want to be sad anymore." Through her journal entries, Maria documented the heartbreak she felt when her husband left their home in Laredo, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. The journal, along with recordings on her cell phone, exposed her husband's abusive behavior and chronicled her emotional journey from grief to healing, and eventually, a newfound optimism for the future. Maria Munoz wrote in her journal the day before her death, "What is it that I want? Number 1, move forward." Her journal entries revealed a strong desire to live and move forward with her life, with no mention of suicide or plans to end her life. This led investigators to rule out suicide as a possible cause of death, and they continued to search for answers. Dr. John Hunsinger, Maria's previous employer and an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective, Cruz. Dr. Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators conducted. In January 2021, the toxicology test results were finally received by investigators Sergeant Louis Matt and Cruz. Contrary to Maria's boyfriend Pellet's claim, Maria did not have clonazepam in her system. The report revealed a surprising discovery: the presence of 7 surgical drugs including morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Lian, and Narin. These medications are typically used during surgical procedures, with propofol and ketamine often administered intravenously as sedatives and for pain management. The investigation into Maria's death took a significant turn when toxicology results revealed high levels of propofol in her system. This was shocking because propofol is a highly controlled substance, typically only accessible to medical professionals working in anesthesiology. As a nurse anesthetist, Pellet would have had access to propofol, leading investigators to suspect him. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience with propofol, was stunned by the extreme amount found in Maria's body, the highest he had ever seen. Given Pellet's profession, investigators believed he would know the exact dosage required to sedate or overdose someone. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested she may have been injected with a substance. With the toxicology report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, authorities felt they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for Maria's murder. They quickly obtained an arrest warrant, and De La Cruz went to apprehend Pellet, who surprisingly did not resist. He was taken into custody, marking a new phase in the investigation. As police prepared to question him about Maria's death, Pellet would finally face the consequences of his actions. The trial began on March 21, 2023. During the legal proceedings, both the prosecution and defense presented their arguments. The prosecution team, an all-female group referred to as Maria's team, used Maria Munoz's personal journal entries to build a strong case against the defendant Pellet. This evidence helped to portray Maria as a devoted wife and mother to the jury. Prosecutors portrayed Maria as a loving, intelligent, and vibrant individual, evident through her personal journal. They alleged that her husband, Pellet, drugged her by slipping substances into her drink, causing her to become unconscious. While she was incapacitated, they claimed he injected propofol into her arm. The prosecutors also suspected that Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, ensuring that emergency responders would be unable to revive Maria upon arrival. The prosecutors believed Maria's journals provided insight into the challenges she faced, fueling their determination to seek justice for her. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, claimed his client wanted to reconcile with Maria before her death. Bali pointed to the medical examiner's report, which stated that Maria's cause of death remained uncertain, and argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove Pellet's responsibility in her death. Bali highlighted a crucial detail. Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narun, commonly used to reverse overdoses, on the night she died. Bali also revealed that both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Furthermore, he argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, an investigation into Maria's social circles, friends, and family revealed that she was not a drug addict. In fact, Pellet was the only person who could have supplied her with the large amount of propofol found in her system. The authorities managed to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She disclosed that Pellet had admitted to giving Maria something to calm her down and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury delivered a verdict in under an hour, finding Pellet guilty of murdering his wife, Maria, after a 9-day trial on March 30, 2023. On April 27, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. As of now, Joel Pellet is serving his life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment serves as a testament to accountability and a tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Joel Pellet's brutal act of killing his wife, Maria Munoz, is not entirely clear. However, according to the prosecution, it is believed that he was driven by a desire to end his marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Regardless of the motive, Pellet's actions were inexcusable and justice had to be served. The jury's verdict has brought a sense of closure to this tragic case, confirming that heinous crimes like this will not be tolerated. The conviction serves as a powerful reminder that those who commit such atrocities will face the full weight of the law. On May 2, 2009, in Wausau, Wisconsin, USA, a terrible crime took place. An 18-year-old girl named Brianna Marie Schneller was the victim. For the small town, such an event was shocking, particularly since the girl's death was the result of actions executed with unimaginable cruelty. However, more shocking than the crime itself was the motive behind it. Brianna had a vibrant personality, loved Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and she was fond of roller coasters. She was very diligent and performed well academically. She was the top student at Everest High School in Washington, said Craig and Lori Schneller, her parents. She had a trip planned to Tennessee that summer. The young lady was the only one in the state of Wisconsin who had made it through the qualifying rounds of a competition held by a renowned national nonprofit organization for students in professional and technical fields, where she was to present her project. Brianna aspired to pursue higher education in restaurant management and dreamed of someday starting her own business in the food service industry. Therefore, she worked part-time at the El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain to earn money and gain the necessary experience and skills. Friends, colleagues, and even patrons described her as a kind and responsive person. She was just a month away from significant milestones in her life. She was about to graduate from school and marry her beloved 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez. Initially, her parents objected to their relationship and the age difference. In their view, their daughter had matured too quickly. However, after getting to know the young man better, they trusted him. It was evident that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious intentions regarding their future together. The couple moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wausau along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. Outwardly, it seemed that the trio got along well and lived peacefully. Many envied their friendship. The brothers supported Brianna's interests, as they also worked at a restaurant called El Tequila Salsa in the same area. It is possible that one workday was when Sebastian and Brianna met each other. In any case, no one expected that a horrific tragedy could disrupt the plans and dreams of the two lovers. The morning of May 2, 2009 began as usual. Sebastian was the first to rise in the house. He didn't want to wake the girl sweetly sleeping beside him. It was a day off, and she didn't need to rush to school. While the young man was in the shower, Brianna woke up. They exchanged sweet greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to wake up Hugo, who had come home in the early morning and had clearly overdone it at a party the night before. After that, Sebastian left for work, which was only a 5-10-minute walk away. His younger brother followed soon after. The girl stayed home alone. She exchanged messages with her mother and then got on with her tasks. That day, Hugo felt restless. He had a headache from too much drinking and regretted overindulging. Struggling to focus, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague, and at 1:20 p.m., he headed home to catch some sleep. When he entered the apartment, nothing seemed unusual at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed a disorder in his brother's and his girlfriend's room. For some reason, Brianna was lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what happened, but she did not respond. He didn't immediately notice the blood. The young man moved the towel that had been covering her face and screamed. She was unrecognizably disfigured. He grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Nevertheless, he knew he had to act, and he ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below. Through tears, young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked the woman to call for help. At 1:30 p.m., the emergency services received a call. Despite it being a Saturday, the day was far from peaceful. Unfortunately, incidents often occur on days when people are supposed to relax. The woman on the other end of the line reported that she was calling on behalf of a neighbor. He had asked her to summon emergency medical services for his brother's girlfriend. The unfortunate woman lay on the floor with cuts on her body and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were dispatched to the address immediately. The parking lot of the apartment building was crowded, but one individual stood out from the crowd and approached them. It was Hugo Ramirez. He led the officers to the apartment. The young man could barely speak, so he simply pointed out the shocking scene. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep wounds. Stab wounds were evident on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked the young man to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination. One speculated that the victim had been lying there for some time, as the blood scattered everywhere had already started to dry. It was clear she had fought back, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the assailant had overpowered her. The crime scene was rife with evidence. The first thing the forensic team noticed was a bloody iron lying on the floor, broken with some pieces scattered nearby. It appeared that the criminal had used it to strike her face. 2 knives lay in the bathroom sink, one missing its sharp tip. Blood was found on the soap, leading investigators to speculate that the criminal had used it to wash their hands. But the bloodied shoe print left on the carpet drew more attention. Overall, the examination of the dwelling revealed several curious details. There appeared to be no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim knew the wrongdoer or that he had some way of gaining entry to the apartment. Another notable detail was the scattered bills ranging from $1 to $20, amounting to a substantial sum. Hugo explained that these were tips they had accumulated at work, so much so that they were just placed anywhere. At first glance, nothing seemed to be missing from the apartment. Everything pointed to the fact that Brianna was the target of the attack, not robbery. This was confirmed by the broken knife tip found in her body. What kind of force was necessary to break a knife? Who could harbor such feelings towards a young woman? And most importantly, what could have been the cause of such unprecedented cruelty and aggression? Eager to shed light on the matter, law enforcement officers were keen to speak with the girl's relatives and close friends, especially as they needed to convey the dreadful news. In the police department's office, Craig and Lori Schneller awaited news. They had heard that something terrible had occurred at the home where their daughter lived, but unfortunately, they had been unable to contact her. With heavy hearts, they went to the police station seeking answers. The officers had to confirm the parents' worst fears were indeed true. There was no greater sorrow for parents than to endure the loss of a child. The devastating news split the Schnellers' life into before and after. Authorities provided photographs of Brianna for identification. The process was a mere formality, as her identity was already established, but protocol required it. Due to the horrific injuries, not all photographs taken at the scene were shown to the family. Only those that showed part of her face were displayed. Once confirmed, the Schnellers could hardly believe what had happened. After consulting with a psychologist, Craig and Lori were able to answer a series of questions. They were eager to assist the investigation and catch the person responsible, so they provided as much information about their daughter's life as possible. The parents insisted that she had no known enemies or ill-wishers, at least to their knowledge. It was also revealed that Brianna's mother was the last person she had communicated with. That morning, Lori had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop and had messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to inform her. Brianna had responded. This means that the tragic incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo's arrival, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a comprehensive investigation. The first to be invited for an interview by the detectives were the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, who were questioned separately. The fiancé of the victim, Sebastian, reported that he woke up at 9:15 in the morning, had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother. By 10:15, he was already at the restaurant. He learned about the incident after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched, stating he left the house about 15 minutes after Sebastian. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue vanished when he discovered Brianna lifeless. After that, everything seemed like a blur. He explained that he was so stunned that he couldn't think straight on how to react properly. His mind shut down and his hands trembled, leading him to run to a neighbor and ask for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements were credible and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police had often encountered convincing performances before, so they needed solid proof of their innocence. It was entirely possible that one of them was the perpetrator and the other was covering for him. Therefore, detectives inquired about their relationships with each other. Sebastian declared his love for Brianna and his anticipation for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was asked if he had any grievances against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had quarreled, to which he responded negatively. He also clarified that despite her attractiveness and charm, he had no intentions toward her because he valued their good relationship and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Brianna was like a sister to him. The interrogations lasted for hours, yet neither brother aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples from the young men, they were allowed to return home. To confirm or refute the Ramirez brothers' alibis, detectives interviewed employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the establishment's surveillance footage. Sebastian and Hugo's accounts were corroborated. The theory of a domestic-related crime was dismissed. Then who was the murderer of this innocent young woman? Could there be a predator in the city? Perhaps he had been watching Brianna earlier and had learned much about her. Maybe on a day when she was alone, he executed his criminal intent. The investigation continued. By this point, the autopsy results had come in, confirming the initial suspicions of the police. The sequence of the crime was reconstructed as follows. Brianna first sustained a blunt force injury to the head, likely with an iron. Then the perpetrator cut her throat, followed by multiple stab wounds to her body. The ferocity and relentlessness of the attack were evidenced by the number of wounds, which were so numerous that even experts couldn't tally them. At least 2 of these injuries were immediately fatal. The young woman fought fiercely for her life, as indicated by the foreign DNA found under her nails. Later developments revealed that earlier statements claiming nothing was missing from the home were incorrect. The victim's phone had disappeared. Sebastian discovered the loss and promptly informed the detectives. This piece of information became a critical lead, as once the police received this new clue, they began searching for the mobile device. Brianna's cell phone provider reported that her phone was still active and provided its location. It turned out that the phone had been nearby all along, specifically within the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation grew more complex with the brothers' undeniable alibi, and one of them reporting the missing phone against the backdrop of suspicious coincidences. Detectives urgently traveled to the specified location, but upon arrival, they found that the coordinates led to the parking lot of a shopping center housing the restaurant. It appeared the sought-after item was in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found inside a container. Within the bag were the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery shifted the narrative, as theories about a predator and a crime driven by intimate motives began to gain traction. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory for further examination, potentially still holding fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the contents, Sebastian recognized his girlfriend's underwear. The investigation proceeded with numerous interrogations of the restaurant staff. On May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo examinations for any scratches or injuries. Additionally, both the external and internal surveillance footage of the building and neighboring establishments was thoroughly reviewed. The police had a considerable task ahead of them to determine who had disposed of the bag. Initially, a kitchen worker attracted attention because he was notably late for work, arriving when Brianna was already lifeless. However, the young man had an alibi. He had been stopped for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Nonetheless, reviewing the surveillance footage proved invaluable to the investigation. Another individual, the 24-year-old kitchen manager Raul Ponce Rocha, became a person of interest. On the day of the crime, He left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned at 10:53 a.m. without it. During questioning, he was asked about his whereabouts and intentions. Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant. Interestingly, Luciano lived in the same building as Brianna, Sebastian, and Hugo. When asked how long his errand took, he said about 20 minutes, but there was a problem with the timeline. What happened in the remaining 15 minutes? Raul refused to explain. Meanwhile, Luciano confirmed Raul's story, saying they did not stop anywhere on their way to work. However, the 15-minute discrepancy continued to trouble the detectives, and Raul's behavior raised questions. He had cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Raul was clearly suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence for his detention. By May 9th, it was established that on May 2nd, at 1:16 p.m., a single employee exited the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. Identifying the suspect took little time. When his name was announced, the investigative team was not surprised. It was not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially thought, but the suspect, Raul Ponce-Rocha. When a search warrant was obtained for his home, curious details about the manager's life emerged. Under the mattress of his bed were found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos along with a brown hoodie and a glove resembling the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag. A strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. Everything pointed to the victim, Brianna. It was just a matter of matching the test results. Raul was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. When it became known that the alleged perpetrator had been found, Sebastian couldn't believe his ears. He never thought his colleague capable of such cruelty. The main question that troubled him was, why did he do it? They hardly knew Brianna and had only seen her in passing. Raul had always seemed like a kind and cheerful guy, someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. But the answer was found. The trial of Raul Ponce-Rocha took place in 2011. Despite the lengthy investigation, Ponce-Rocha never admitted guilt and consistently denied any involvement in the crime. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence. The defendant's DNA was found on all key pieces of evidence: the iron, the knives, the plastic bag and its contents, and under Brianna's fingernails. Additionally, a shoe print found on the carpet at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of the suspect's shoes. The investigation painted a clear picture of the events. On May 2, 2009, Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. En route to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, a place that had long piqued his interest. Not seeing her car, he assumed she was out and saw it as an opportune moment to enter her apartment and take what he desired. The accused had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, the evidence of which was found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived at work, Raul left the restaurant under the guise of picking up Luciano. Instead of signaling his friend immediately upon arrival, he entered the victim's apartment. He easily unlocked the door and entered. It appears he went into Brianna's room and began rummaging through her belongings. He was likely caught off guard at that moment. Otherwise, he could have excused his unexpected presence by claiming he was looking for one of the brothers and that the door had been open. Realizing the absurdity of the situation and fearing recognition, he struck her with the first object he could find, an iron. He then slashed her throat with a knife, followed by inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation concluded that the process of taking her life seemed to gratify him, as evidenced by the excessive number of wounds inflicted on the poor victim. It also noted that Raul used multiple knives during the attack. Afterwards, the culprit tried to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, as he still had to meet Luciano and drive him to the restaurant. He then resumed work, as if nothing had happened, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. When many staff took their lunch breaks, he seized the moment to dispose of the bag containing the evidence in a trash bin. Shortly before the trial, Raul stated that he indeed met with Brianna, but did not end her life. However, he suspected who might have done it and named a former restaurant employee. According to the defendant, he saw this acquaintance at Brianna's house on the day her life was tragically ended, thus confirming that he indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when he left, Sergio stayed with Brianna, apparently having an argument. The defendant's statement raised additional questions and investigations. The information he provided was subject to verification. Moreover, the individual he mentioned was abroad. Nonetheless, authorities managed to contact Sergio. He even appeared at the trial to testify his non-involvement and refute Raul's slander. The young man easily proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime. Weeks before, he had left to care for his gravely ill father in Mexico. Apparently, the defendant hoped that contact with Sergio would not be established, thereby sowing a seed of doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed. The defendant merely emphasized that he had no qualms about falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime. It was clear that he felt no remorse for his actions. During the trial, Brianna's relatives, as well as Sebastian and Hugo, were present. The young men struggled to contain their emotions, prompting officers to repeatedly call for calm. Ultimately, Raul Ponce Rocha was found guilty of the crime against Brianna Schneller, as well as burglary. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He is serving his sentence at a correctional institution in Walpun, Wisconsin. Following the verdict, the victim's father stated that his daughter's case had become personal for many involved, as they all have families and children. He shared that he has not parted with a Father's Day card Brianna gave him, cherishing every memory of her. Craig Schneller confessed that Brianna's death broke his heart, and he lost faith. No information about Sebastian Ramirez is available. It is only to be hoped that he has closed this tragic chapter of his life with a sense of completeness and has been able to move forward. One day, his brother Hugo appeared on a television show discussing the ordeal they endured. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna. He not only ended the life of a beautiful young woman, but also devastated the hearts of her family. Things could have been different if the young man had not chosen to cover his tracks. He might have gotten away with clumsy explanations and apologies to the girl. At most, it would have ended with a confrontation between him and the Rodriguez brothers. It is unlikely the victim would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm.